This is the MeatEater podcast coming at you shirtless, severely bug-bitten, and in my case, underwearless.
We hunt the MeatEater podcast.
You can't predict anything.
The MeatEater podcast is brought to you by First Light. Whether you're checking trail cams, hanging deer stands, or scouting for elk, First Light has performance apparel to support every hunter in every environment. Check it out at firstlight.com. FIRSTLITE.com. Today we're making good on a promise, and we have back in our studio historian and author Hampton Sides, who joined us on episode 298. What number are we on now?
530 something.
540 something.
Mm-hmm. Joined us a long time ago on an episode, probably the best named episode we ever had, Cooking Captain Cook. Mm-hmm. And at that time, we kind of went through Hampton. We went through your, what do you call one's collection of books?
Your body of work, your oeuvre.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, something like that. There's a couple extra letters in there.
We went through his body of work, and toward the end of the interview, or kind of throughout the interview, we talked about what you then were working on now, which was a book about Captain Cook. And I think that even at the time I had shared with you that I had been
to Hawaii
and passed by where Captain Cook was killed, where he ultimately met his end.
Right.
And I was there last week.
Yeah.
And showed my kids.
Wow. You're so tan now.
Yeah.
Now I understand why.
We had a laugh where I said to my kids, we're driving by fishing for onos, that wahoo, which they call onos in Hawaii. And I yelled to my kids over the very loud boat engine of my friend's diesel boat engine and yelled, "That's where Captain Cook got killed." And my kids, half paying attention, one of them said, "Oh, awesome." And that became kind of the joke for the day. But so we said we're going to come back, that we were going to have you back when you finish your book, and the book is now out and available, publishes on April 9, called The Wide, Wide Sea, Imperial Ambition, First Contact, and the Fateful Final Voyage of Captain James Cook. And if you are interested in pre-contact, contact era, Alaska, Hawaii, which wind up being coupled together in unexpected ways, still today, I find. So much cross-cultural exchange between Alaska and Hawaii. They kind of have a Pacific thing going on. This book explores it. We're going to discuss it today. I usually try to. I do a pretty good job. I usually try to read books before we talk about them, but I haven't gotten to it yet. But you have such a trusted track record. I'm just going to come out right now and say it's good.
Well, that's good to hear. There's nothing worse than hosts who claim they've read it and then you find out they haven't. So your honesty is appreciated.
No, I can't lie to you. But I can, just based off your body of work, your oeuvre, based off your oeuvre, I can tell everybody it's great. And we're going to dig in on it, and we're going to discuss the conflicting reports of whether or not Captain Cook was indeed consumed when we talked about cooking Captain Cook. Yeah. And I didn't know did you tell us the details of it last time about
I think we hinted at it, but I wasn't trying to.
The little heart detail?
Yeah, we may have mentioned it. We'll get into it a little bit more.
Conflicting accounts.
Yes.
Conflicting accounts.
But I just wanted to say thank you for getting the name right, Captain Cook. So many people have said to me, "Oh, you're writing a book about Captain Hook."
Oh,
the pirate.
We'd have had you on a long time ago if you wrote a book about Captain Hook.
The parrot on the shoulder,
That's probably what Steve's kids thought he was talking about.
Captain Hook, he was a bad guy.
No, Captain James Cook.
No.
I find that when we get into the heart story, I'll touch on this more, but I find that, I'll touch on it fully right now. We're going to tell a heart story in a little bit. We got a couple things to touch on first. And then you're familiar with, who was it? Was it Gaul? After the Battle of the Little Bighorn, I think it was Gaul, Unkpapa Sioux warrior. After the Battle of Little Bighorn, I believe he told some people that he had eaten a bite of Tom Custer's heart. So George Armstrong Custer fought and died with his brother at the Battle of Little Bighorn. And Tom Custer had once arrested, took into custody the Sioux warrior Gall and pissed him off. And he claimed, in the years after the battle, he claimed to have taken a bite of Tom Custer's heart. And then later, maybe on second thought, said, "No, I was just kidding." So was he telling the truth when he said he's just kidding, or was he telling the truth when he said he took a bite of Custer's heart?
Whenever I do something like that, I mean, not oftentimes if I change my story, it's because I'm embarrassed by what I initially admitted to. And and then just kidding.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't really know how you're going to receive that. So
Gall had another quote. We're not here to talk about Battle of Little Bighorn, but Gall had another quote where, he said a bunch of things. He's the one that said how long the battle took, that it took about as long as it takes a hungry man to eat his meal. And then later, a Crow scout for Custer later said, "No, I was there, but I got away." And Gall said to him, "You must have turned into a bird if you're saying you were there and you got away." You know what? This is the final. So this is the final mention. There was a big debate about whether or not. See, I made up this new saying. It's a new old saying. A fresh set of eyes will find more beans. And we've talked about it a fair bit. I thought it had finance applications, but we heard from people who were applying it in the medical field, finance. I thought it was catching on.
Law field.
Yeah, law.
forensics.
Yeah, I thought it was really catching on, and people were trying it out on their wives and pissing their wives off. And we made this shirt, but the shirt didn't sell out, which makes me think this didn't catch on.
Well, no, I think it was a timing issue. I think that if we would have had the shirt earlier.
Can you see my shirt, Phil?
Yeah.
Oh, like the shirt, like the saying had come and gone.
Well, not.
I don't think old sayings do that.
we can't see the bottom because your computer there. If you want to shut
can
your computer.
stand up.
There we go. That looks great.
They've. I think they've like 60-something% sold out. We didn't make that many, so go get them, folks who maybe
Wearing mine
don't
right
even
now.
know.
I've been
that
looking at
we've
that
made
shirt
them.
and trying to figure it out without reading any of it, and I was just thought it was like a political or revolutionary.
Well, I thought it might be tiptoeing into like.
It looks like you're calling for land reform.
Communist art.
Yeah.
Like it might be like a little revolutionary.
Yep.
It was other areas. The other day I was telling a story about being on a bus in Memphis, and someone said, "You always got to be careful when you tell Memphis bus stories." But yeah, the fist,
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, here's the interesting thing that's out. This is cool. You guys might remember when we had a bunch of the anthropologists and archaeologists on after doing our Bison Clovis Point experiment, where we worked with researchers from Kent State. Fort Dead in Ohio. That's about Kent State. Researchers from Kent State, Southern Methodist University, Oregon State University, right? Yeah.
Yep.
And they were doing, we were doing research, and we were the participants in the research where we butchered an entire, butchered, boned out an entire buffalo using Ice Age style stone points, particularly using Clovis points and other flakes, and butchered the whole damn thing. I thought we were going to be there into the night. I brought like lighting. I didn't think we'd ever get out of there. Dude, we were done in 4 hours. Butchered the whole thing out in order that the researchers could then do the serious work of analyzing after they were cleaned up. Our friend John Hayes from Hayes Taxidermy Studio did the bone work on it. In order to help interpret Ice Age kill sites. Meaning when you go to an Ice Age kill site, 12,000 years go by, and all that's left is chunks of bone and chunks of stone. Nothing else is left. You can't talk to anybody. All the soft tissue's gone. Things have been gnawed on by animals. So we were helping to create a sort of set of stone and a set of bone where they knew what happened to the stone and bone. And you could take this information and help analyze Ice Age kill sites. meaning when you see that mark on a bone, what led to that mark on a bone? When you see a chunk of stone flake maybe embedded in bone, or a chunk of stone tool that had broke and was discarded, and it's laying there, and you're thinking, well, is that there because they used it to kill the animal and it's laying inside their rib cage? Or was that laying there because they used it to cut up an animal? Meaning, did they maybe find an animal and cut it up? Did they kill an animal with projectile points? When we see a Clovis point, we think that it was on a spear. Is there a chance that that Clovis point was actually a knife? These are all great mysteries. And anyways, the paper's out now. I got excited for a minute because when I got that form letter, it had me down as Dr. Steve.
Even Seth.
It's just a form letter, though. No. And I made the mistake of insulting Seth by saying how everybody is. I already told Seth this and apologized to him. I don't know what this means. I said everybody was doctor, even Seth. What the hell does that mean?
I think the implication is somewhat obvious.
Even Seth. I sent in a correction and I said, hey, just heads up, you got a lot of people down as doctors that ain't. And he said, no, that's just a form letter from the journal. Don't worry, you won't be credited as being a doctor. But Randall, you could actually be a doctor. Well, if they just threw you in there for some reason.
Yeah. Next time.
So the article's out. How do you find it, Corinne?
We're going to have a link to the article in the show notes, and we're also going to have it prominently on the website.
Got it.
So, yeah.
Study is massive. Over 20,000 words. For you people that used to read the New Yorker back in the 90s, that would be a big... That's like when they do like the history of dirt in the New Yorker. 20,000 words, 31 figures, 12 data tables, and 8 supplemental data files. That's supposed to get people excited, Corinne? That's Corinne's note. That's supposed to get people fired up.
No, well, a fair amount of this is from Met.
People at home are like, wow, 31 figures.
Ordinarily, you only get 3 supplemental data files.
Those are for all the nerds out there.
Yeah, Corinne should get a job writing copy.
No,
20,000 words, 31 figures, 12 data tables, and 8 supplemental data files. Call now.
No, most of that is from Metten. I asked him to put in what he thought would be important to highlight, and that sums it up for people who speak the science language. But
so go read about that. It's fascinating, and I liked it, and I want to do more. And what we needed to do is I wanted to do the one where we cut up a person. Because hey, listen, Clayton sent me an article the other day about out of Prince Wales Island in the caves finding 10,000-year-old bear bones, and I think he said something about some human remains that seemed to have been gnawed on, and I'm like, gnawed on 10,000 years later? You sure it wasn't something else? Live tour kicks off April 23rd. What's it right now? 9th, 10th? 8th? Whatever the hell. Live tour kicks off April 23rd in Mesa, Arizona. From Mesa, Arizona, we do April 23rd is Mesa, Arizona at Mesa Arts Center. From there, we do 3 shows in California. So we're creating a safe space for hunters and anglers in California where you can come share your real lived experience about being a hunter or an angler. San Diego, Anaheim, Sacramento. Go to Salt Lake City, Boise, Missoula, Portland, Tacoma. Am I missing anything? Mesa.
Spokane.
No, you got it.
Spokane.
Yeah.
So it goes like this. Check me on this. Mesa, San Diego, Anaheim, Mesa, San Diego, Anaheim, Sacramento, Salt Lake City, Boise, Missoula, Spokane, Portland, Tacoma. Mr. Clay Newcomb will be there for all the shows. We got a lot of other people coming in and coming out, coming and going. Brody, you gonna make it you're gonna come over for the Missoula show?
For sure.
Hell yeah. Every ticket gets a signed copy of the MeatEater Outdoor Cookbook, which is a brand new release. Actually, the tour is during the release week. So every ticket comes with a signed copy. We're gonna have you'll learn stuff, you'll laugh, you have a potential to win some great stuff. So looking forward to seeing everyone there. Also, we got a new thing going, MeatEater Experiences. So this is kind of a long story. I don't want to spend too much time on it. I've been spearfishing down out of Venice, Louisiana, and I became friends with Renee Cross at Cypress Cove Marine and Lodge, and we hit on this idea where we're going to take over his whole place and do a big fishing party. So that's kicking off in October. Me going to be down there, Jan's going to be down there, Clay's going to be down there, a bunch of other people coming and going. And we're filling up spots for that. You can go sign up to come down. We're going to clean fish together, do stuff at night, have a lot of talks, a lot of laughs. Each setup is 3 days of fishing, offshore, inshore. April 15th, you can go check out those MeatEater experiences at themeateater.com. And then we also have a waterfowl one coming up in the winter, which you'll be able to check out as well. Pat Durkin wrote in. Pat Durkin remains the only man in the world who's wolf neutral. So we like to check in with wolf neutral people now and then. They just don't have it's a real soapbox, the wolf neutral person.
Is it an agnosticism or an apathy?
No, it's like, not apathy, because that would imply not staying up with the...
Yeah.
Well, Pat Durkin's the only guy in the world that can listen to wolf stuff from either side and be like, it'll work out. Mm-hmm.
He doesn't fly into a rage either way.
Mm-hmm. He, what Pat got wondering about, he says, at risk of annoying you with yet another wolf neutral column, this one explains, his column, he's an outdoor columnist. This one explains how Wisconsin's hunters and trappers killed 218 wolves in 3 days in February 21, but needed 10 weeks to kill 257 wolves in 2013. Mystery being the number of wolves on the landscape didn't change. He says, mostly, though, my review springs from a conversation with Al Hofacker, my first boss at Deer and Deer Hunting magazine in the early 1990s, who nearly died last year from the tick-borne disease, which I have not heard of. This is me editorializing. I'm reading Pat, but I'm editorializing by me having not heard of it. Babesiosis? Anyone heard of this?
Babesiosis? I just looked it up. It infects red blood cells.
Yeah. No, I got waylaid bad by trichinosis, but I got waylaid somewhat bad by trichinosis and waylaid bad by Lyme. And my boy got waylaid so bad by Lyme, he developed Bell's palsy. His milk could run out the corner of his mouth. Horrible. That was a long editorialization. Back to Pat. Quote, he got me laughing when he said he'd rather die in a wolf attack because it would cause less suffering while making him famous as, get this, people, the first Wisconsinite in history killed by a wolf, meaning that's yet to happen. That inspired, this is Pat still talking, this is an interesting tidbit. That inspired me to dig into Wisconsin's costs, damages from tick-borne diseases versus wolf attacks on livestock, pets, and bear hounds. Guess what their costs and damages are from tick-borne diseases annually? I'm going to beat this book on the table for this. $12 million annually in ticks. Native wildlife, the tick, costing Wisconsin $12 billion annually. Now, take a stab at over the past 5 years the average annual cost of wolves. You can't really beat the book about this. No, you can beat a book about how low something is, right?
Yeah.
$177,000.
Wow.
I don't know what Pat's, and again, I started to feel like Pat's not wolf. I think Pat's a wolf apologist dressed up in sheep's clothing. He's masquerading as a wolf neutralist. $12 million in tick damages, $177,000 in wolf damages. Whatever, Pat. Whatever. Pat, the last of the outdoor columnists. We should be nice to Pat Durkin. Because when he dies, the old outdoor columnist, I don't even want to say it. And Pat's far from death. He still runs marathons.
Unless a tick gets him.
Unless a tick gets him.
Shouldn't say that.
Yeah, I should put a tick in his put a tick in his underwear or something. And a while later, be like, "How you like them ticks now, Pat?" And he'd be like, "Did I say I didn't? Did I say I like ticks?" In episode 518, you were talking about old fur price lists that had Bobcat, Wildcat, Lynx, and Lynx Cat pricing, and wondered why they had so many different names for Bobcats in those days. This is when we had a lynx researcher on. Carmen Van Bianchi from Home Range Wildlife was on talking about a project in Washington State of collaring lynx, which they caught 4. They caught 3 males and a female. I need to announce the other 2 winners. Dang it. They caught 4. They're all done for the year. They were very happy to get a female lynx. And this guy this guy says he was talking to an old fur buyer, 3rd generation fur buyer, and he had an explanation for why all this crazy nomenclature. He told me that in the old days, wildcat was the general name for any of the smaller wildcats like bobcat, lynx, and ocelot. So the sort of bucket term was a wildcat. Bobcat, lynx, ocelot. Lynx was what was used in the old days. So we're talking about, you go back to the 20s and 30s. Lynx was used for what we still call lynx today. Bobcat was used for western and coastal bobcats that tend to have dull colors and coarser fur. Lynx cat was used for the brighter colored with more silk-like fur found on western bobcats, like high plains western bobcats, the ones that are super valuable today. They did this because of very noticeable differences between western bobcats and those eastern coastal bobcats. So at the time, they believed they were different species, meaning if you look at a bobcat from Michigan, all dull, no good spots, and a bobcat from, high elevations in Nevada, you'd be like, well, they can't be the same thing. They got to be different. So they just called them these different names. Now, people would catch them and get excited when they see bobcats or whatever listed for super high price. So they came up with this different name just to try to denote different fur qualities. He says the Idaho Fur Sale still lists western and eastern bobcats in different categories on their sale average price list. This is so trappers can have a better idea what their bobcat should sell for, since the eastern bobcats will be lower than the overall average results, giving eastern trappers a false high expectation and western trappers a false low expectation of what it's all worth. Hence, when you're looking at something, you're like, how did they have all these cats in those days that no one knows about anymore? I don't want to spend time on this, but Corinne thought this was interesting. This is pretty common. That someone dies, you put their ashes in shotgun shells.
I didn't know that was common at all. Really?
Real common.
Wow.
Real common among a small group of people.
Yeah.
meaning 2 guys a year do this.
Yeah, how come is this the first time we've ever talked about it?
But I have heard of it before.
Hunter S. Thompson had his loaded into like artillery shells.
Sorry for my ignorance, everybody.
Oh, dude. Where's that big shell behind? Is that still back there?
Yes.
I'm going to load. We put all of us in that.
Yeah.
I feel like you've talked about ways that you'd like your remains to be used
It changes.
post-mortem.
Yeah,
So
it
that
changes.
it's not included and you don't want to...
I thought it was you want to become a
like-
piece of carrion.
Well, I did want to get
Right.
scavenged by bears, but I'm kind of thinking now, I was looking at the prices too. Get buried in the Twin Lakes Cemetery where I grew up. You get in the ground there for $600, but if you want to get back out, guess they charge you if you want to get out. $600 to get in, $1,300 to get out.
That's not bad.
No.
Well,
If you change
I've
your mind,
paid a lot more for an exhumation.
someone changes their mind, they got to fork over $1,300 to get you back out of the ground. I might do that. I'm going to go there and look next time I'm over there. A guy wrote in a big explanation of why we shouldn't be dogging on these monkey farms they're trying to put in down south, getting everybody all worked up. People in Texas are worked up. People in Georgia are worked up about these giant monkey farms they're building to supply the research facilities. Turns out no one gets excited about a monkey farm in their neighborhood. But he gets into some of the things that are going on. The U.S. medical world is in critical need of rhesus macaws. China has halted. He's talking about, here's why this is going on. China has halted a large number of exports of these primates to the country in retaliation to the current trade wars with the U.S., which are going to get a lot worse next January. January 6th. When Trump's back in office, it's going to get a lot. The trade wars are not worse. The trade wars are going to intensify when Trump's back in office, and I imagine it's going to lead to probably even fewer monkeys running around. And then there's another thing what was the other thing you said? There was another thing leading to all this monkey problem. I don't know. Come on, Corinne, help me out here. You put it down.
The USDA said no. Well, I'm not sure what's in your mind that.
Well, they're running low on monkeys.
Supply and demand.
Yeah, it's like we'd
like to produce our monkeys right here, just like critical minerals.
Yeah, there were some geopolitical things that led to this monkey crisis. So when you people are saying you don't want a monkey farm next door, keep in mind that there were geopolitical constraints that have led to the rhesus monkey shortage.
Right, and here's the USDA sends inspectors who are vets at random times, unannounced, at least once a year.
He was selling us on how safe these monkey farms are.
Right.
Then he said, "Don't use my name."
Well, yeah. No, but it's not for that. He just doesn't want to be attacked by animal welfare. Right.
The rhesus macaws are vital for testing vaccine efficacy, novel cancer treatments, and various other life-saving research projects at most R1 universities and pharmaceutical companies. As someone who has worked in biomedical research for all of my career for T10 universities, I can tell you that the need for these primates is indeed very dire. So when they go to put a big monkey farm in your yard, keep that in mind.
Humans versus monkeys, basically.
They need to round up those wild ones running around in Florida.
I did not pass judgment on the need for rhesus monkeys. I just said, it sure seems like people don't want monkey farms down the road.
That seems true too, yep.
That's abundantly clear. People freak.
The classic NIMBYism.
But he goes on to say, I can tell you one thing that ain't going to happen is these monkeys ain't going to be getting out, and biosecurity is taken very seriously with tons of oversight from the federal government. So if you trust them folks at the federal government, this is not, he's just saying this is not like a little, it's not like a hobby monkey farm going on.
Petting zoo.
And USDA folks can go in and shut it down real fast.
It's a highly regulated, tons of oversight, meaning I don't think these people should plan on being like, oh God, there's a monkey in the yard. You never know. Never know. We put on hold. We're going to talk about this later. Probably about a dozen people wrote in with like, here's how I neuter my own cat.
Overall, more than that, actually, yeah.
But we're going to put that on hold in order to talk more about Captain Cook. If you forgot, Hampton Sides is here, author of the brand new The Wide, Wide Sea. First off, why The Wide, Wide Sea? The name. It is big.
It's a quote from Coleridge, who wrote this poem, the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. And, scholars say
Led
that
Zeppelin followed that up, right?
Yeah, that sounds like something Zeppelin would do. Coleridge was influenced by Cook's 3 voyages around the world, and it's about a captain who's having an existential crisis, which Cook was on this 3rd voyage, because the book is about his 3rd voyage. He had
his final voyage.
His final voyage, literally and figuratively, and things do not go well, as you alluded to earlier. Near the end of his voyage, things go horribly wrong, and he is, hacked to pieces on the beach on the Big Island of Hawaii. So it's a title just sort of getting at the psychology of a captain who's a little tired, who's having some problems, medical, mental, physical, and maybe even spiritual. Can
you explain just to set it up? Can you give us his time frame and just quickly, what were the first 2 voyages?
Yeah.
Like where he's from and when and
Well, so
what did he do?
So Captain Cook, I mentioned earlier that I think a lot of Americans get him mixed up with a lot of other captains, sort of real and imaginary, whether it's Captain Kidd or Captain Hook,
Captain Kirk,
Captain Kirk of the which is you laugh, but in fact, Captain Kirk was influenced by was actually based on Captain Cook,
really?
So his first voyage was the Endeavor instead of the HMS Endeavor. It was the USS Enterprise, and Captain James Cook.
Okay.
So yeah, there is a direct correlation.
What I thought you meant is you said you're writing a book. I thought you were having a problem where you're writing a book about Captain Cook, and people are like, "Oh, I love Star Trek."
Right. And then there's Captain Crunch.
I got a bone to pick with that son of a bitch because when you eat Captain
the roof
Crunch,
of your mouth,
the lacerations,
cuts you up.
I know.
The roof of your
you
mouth.
can run through a box like that.
I remember those days. A lot of sugar. So Captain Cook was probably the quintessential Enlightenment era explorer, one of the greatest explorers of all time. No matter what you think of his voyages or him as a man, or of course he's very controversial today, especially indigenous people all over Polynesia have decided they hate him and that he's a symbol of colonialism, and they rip down his statues everywhere. But back then, and
they did a little bit of exploring themselves.
They were masters at it.
When you say back then, what was his time period?
His time period was his voyages were in the 1760s and the 1770s.
That's an era that me and Randall are intimately familiar with in Kentucky.
Okay.
Yeah,
that was a throw to the Long Hunters.
Yeah,
that's about the only place he didn't get to.
Right.
That's why we focused there. We didn't want to overlap with your work.
Yeah. But what's great about him, what I love about him, is that he came from virtually nothing. Unlike a lot of these captains who had money or influence or connections, he got there by sheer hard work and intellect and genius, and came up he was a poor farmer who apprenticed to become to be part of the Merchant Marine,
but British born,
British, and in Yorkshire, and he was really good at everything that to do with navigation, astronomy, cartography, and he ended up that really his true genius was maps. He made beautiful maps that are chillingly accurate, often on the fly. He mapped Nova Scotia, and if you superimpose a satellite image of Nova Scotia on the map that he made of Nova Scotia back then in the 1700s, it's just exact. It's like, how did he do it?
Just with celestial navigation and handheld equipment, right? Astrolabes and
surveying tools and triangulation and trigonometry, But his first two voyages around the world were first to search for the supercontinent that was. All these scientists believed there had to be this massive continent in the southern hemisphere to counterbalance all the land masses that are predominantly in the northern hemisphere.
To counterbalance in weight.
Yeah, they actually thought that the planet would spin off into outer space.
It wasn't a good balanced sphere.
Yeah, it's a crazy idea.
Yeah, it's like getting the leads on your tires right.
Yeah. So it's like Terra Australis Incognita, which was the name of this mythic supercontinent that did not exist, but Cook was sent to find it, and he did find Australia. It had been spotted by another guy named Abel Tasman before, but he charted the entire east coast of. That's where we get Tasmania.
Hung his name on Tasmania.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Cook mapped the entire east coast of Australia, and along the way had all sorts of other adventures in Polynesia, and ran aground on the Great Barrier Reef and nearly sank his ship, the Endeavor. That was his first voyage. The second voyage was another attempt to find this supercontinent, and he nearly made it to Antarctica and kind of intuited the existence of Antarctica. But even Antarctica and Australia combined would not be anywhere near as large as this supercontinent that was. It was just one of these crazy scientific ideas that the people in the Royal Society believed in, So he proved it didn't exist.
When had people more thoroughly given up, even though they've picked it back up again? When had they thoroughly given up on flat Earth?
Well, there's still people today who.
Well, I know, yeah, it's like a new goofy thing now.
Yeah. I don't know. I probably a little earlier, probably in the 1600s.
Okay, so that was a dead idea at this time. Then,
no, their astronomy was amazing at that point, and Cook, that was his other great talent, was he was an amazing astronomer. He also had this new tool by the second voyage that changed exploration dramatically, and this was a little thing called a chronometer, and the chronometer told what was the time in Greenwich, England. And that allowed people. It's too complicated to explain, but that allowed people, just by looking at this clock, you could figure out longitude. And that was the hard thing they couldn't figure out. Latitude they could figure out easily, but longitude was this puzzle. And once you figure out the coordinates of a place, Cook was able to know exactly where he was anywhere in the world and put that on a map. And these maps were published. And then suddenly all these places that he discovered or rediscovered could never again hide from the eyes of the world. And so this is one of the reasons Polynesians hate him so much, is that they, kind of had lived in splendid isolation for centuries and millennia. And now, he just posted the address.
It's an interesting point. Like it's obvious, but I never thought about it before, that you could see something.
Right.
And from then you could see something and very specifically say where it was, rather than say we sailed kind of west for 2 weeks and then you'll find this little thing. Maybe.
Yeah, like Tasman. We mentioned Tasman earlier. He's been a lot of these places, but he didn't know where he was, and he couldn't report back with any confidence what he had seen or where these places were. So Captain Cook has the chronometer, and that changes a lot. But he also he was a scientist. He was interested in these people that he encountered. In the first two voyages, his descriptions of Polynesians and Australian Aborigines are devoid of, the kind of, Eurocentrism that you see in so many other explorers. He just described what they wore and what they looked like, and what they ate, and just was trying to get it down in a kind of objective, neutral way.
Is his writing as clumsy to read as when you read the unedited journals of Lewis and Clark?
He wasn't a writer, that's for sure.
Like
but
the weird spellings.
Yeah, I did kind of do some light editing. I mentioned in the author's note that there's some, I got rid of the ye's and the ampersands and the weird capitalizations and the strange spellings. There was no uniform spelling back then, so some of these things are very hard on the eye and on the ear to follow as you're reading them. But so yes, but he was considering that he really was self-educated. He was quite a good writer, and I quote a lot from him. But I also quote from, there were 180 people on this voyage in 2 ships, and anyone who was literate was writing down in their journals what they were seeing and experiencing, including just massive amounts of sex.
Is that right?
All these books that I've written, my friends always say, well, you need to have more sex in your books. And death marches and, explorations in Siberia, whatever. Now I got a book that has more sex. Orgies on the beach, orgies on the ship, down in the holds of the ship.
Really?
These Polynesian women, and this is something I still...
And who's describing this?
Everyone.
And they're not worried. They don't put that little puritanical cleanup on it.
Not at all, except for Cook himself, who was said to be, and I believe it's true, never did partake in this sort of thing. But all the officers and most of the sailors on the ship were 16, 17, 18 years old, and they were horny, and they certainly the Polynesians had very different ideas about sex, and they were very curious about these strange people that had just washed up on their shores.
So they had to have left all kinds of progeny, huh?
Yes, although I never met anyone who directly claimed to be one, and I did go to almost as many of these places as I could go. Not a hardship research aspect to this.
You have to go to warm places.
Yeah, warm places. Cool, interesting places. New Zealand, both North and South Island. Tasmania, French Polynesia, Hawaii, of course, Alaska, interesting places. And I mean, this is just the third voyage. Cook went just about everywhere.
Was he a celebrity in his own day? Like, were people clamoring to be on these expeditions?
By the time the first voyage was over and they came back, yes, he had become a celebrity. He was sitting for the best painters in London, and he was becoming a member of the Royal Society, and going. He met King George III, and he was becoming very much a celebrity, and he hated that. He was awkward around it. He was intrigued by it a little bit, but he just wanted to get right back out on the next voyage as quickly as he could.
Before we get to number 3, how long were voyages 1 and 2? Like, he's gone. These are multi-year trips, correct?
Yes, they were between 3 and 4 years. It just takes forever to get down there and get back. All sorts of hardships happen along the way. The ship, masts break and they have to repair and so forth. These ships took forever. And the thing was, back then, any kind of voyage that lasted longer than 100 or 200 days, usually people started dying of scurvy. Scurvy was kind of like an occupational hazard of any long voyage. Cook seemed to have figured out scurvy. He didn't precisely know what food was doing the trick, or what in the diet was the secret. But not a single person died on any one of his 3 voyages of scurvy.
Because was it luck? He just was better about food, or
it was a little.
Did he know it was a food thing?
It was. Yes, he understood that, and there had been a Scottish scientist who had shown that lime juice or lemon juice could help with scurvy, but it wasn't. It wasn't that so much. Cook's main idea was, salt foods, salted meat, salt, like pemmican and salted pork, and vinegar, and just kind of all the food that they gave them that kept on the ship. He tried to get away from that as much as possible and make his men eat fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, fresh meat. And he just pounded that into everyone's mind to stop eating the salt pork and start, hunting, go fishing, get wild berries, get wild celery, wherever you can find it. And I think that was the real secret.
Got it.
Yeah.
So set up the third voyage.
Well, the third voyage is and
also include who's bankrolling.
Right. Good question. So the real sort of prime mover and architect behind many of these voyages was this dude named Sandwich, Lord Sandwich, the inventor. In fact, Earl. He was the inventor of the sandwich. Huh. He was a
heard that. Do you really buy that? How do you invent the sandwich?
Well, here's the deal. He was very, very busy and very, very. He was a workaholic, and he didn't have time to eat, so he would just stick a piece of meat between 2 pieces of bread, and that was his meal. And people somehow decided to start calling it the sandwich. Oh, he was the first Lord of the Admiralty. He was a very powerful guy. He was also interested in the science and the exploration that was going on. And he's certainly one of the important people to know about in terms of who was paying for this. The Admiralty paid for a lot of this. The Royal Society, which was a scientific society, also paid for a lot of the scientific work because there were scientists on board, botanists, expedition artists, and these were very well staffed, well manned expeditions.
Were they paying for these expeditions just out of interest in knowing what's out there, or was it more of an angle let's find some stuff to take over?
Both. Everything every chess move that they're making in the world is calculated to beat the French, to beat the Spanish, to beat the Dutch, to beat the Russians. And so that is, there's an imperial chess game going on here that is certainly a big part of it. But they also are creatures of the Enlightenment. They believe in publishing all this stuff and to a wide audience. The maps that are produced by these voyages are incredibly accurate, whereas like the Russian expeditions were laughably, almost cartoonishly wrong, because they had their own interests they were trying to protect. So I'd say Cook kind of had a foot in both worlds. He understood that he was a creature. He was doing the bidding of empire, but he also was genuinely curious about these places and getting them accurately on the map and describing them accurately. And then, oh my God, the published volumes, these giant folio-sized volumes. Cook's third voyage ended up with 3 of these volumes with beautiful engravings and maps and descriptions of animals and plants that had never been seen before by Europeans. It's amazing. And so there is that scientific element that's pretty extraordinary.
But he didn't have a sort of as an overt desire to loot as, say, the Spanish coming into Mexico.
There were a couple of places along the way where he was supposed to come ashore and raise the British flag and claim these lands for the crown, for King George.
Got it.
And he hated this whole rigmarole. I mean, he understood that it was rather absurd when you're on the other side of the world to sort of say these people who were watching, often they'd be watching the ceremony, not knowing what the hell was going on. There was a little clause in his instructions that said, you're supposed to do this with the consent of the natives. Oh yeah, you can take over our country, our continent, our island. It was rather absurd. He did, some might call it looting, but I mean, he did stop along the way many places, and he needed food, he needed water, he needed timber, and he got it one way or the other, either through trade or through bullying his way, into getting the things he needed to keep going on the voyage. But when people say he was a colonizer, he really wasn't a colonizer. He never left a single person behind. He was maybe you could say he was the leading edge of colonialism, because the first act of colonialism, I guess you got to discover these places first or rediscover them. The word discovery is a very controversial word in this business, because of course there were people there already.
Yeah, discovered for his culture.
Right. So you kind of have to say, European to discover. But the Polynesians were, of course, one of the greatest long distance voyagers of all time. But you just got to be careful with the word discovery. Yeah.
No, I understand all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but so he was there was something a little off about Captain Cook in the third voyage, and that's going into it. He wasn't the same captain. People have wondered what was wrong with him. If he had a parasite from all the weird foods that he ate, if he had bipolarism. I mean, some of his actions on the third voyage have been described by some clinical psychologists as being classically bipolar.
What age?
He turned 50 on the voyage.
Okay.
He's 48, I think, when they leave London. And by the way, they leave England, Plymouth actually, in July of 1776.
Something else happened that summer.
Yeah, a lot is going on in Boston.
That July.
The Empire is freaking out about this revolt in America, and they are sending their best explorer that same month to the other side of North America. The ultimate objective of this third voyage, I didn't even say it, is to find the Northwest Passage over Canada, over Alaska. And because this is something the British have been looking for forever, usually from the Atlantic side. Now they're going to try it from the Pacific side, go up through the Bering Strait, using these very murky Russian maps that had been produced by Bering, and try to find this Northwest Passage, this great, fabled waterway that the British were always obsessed with. And so...
Can you pause for a minute to help me understand? The problem with it, I mean, it's there. It's just icy.
Right. And of course...
So they would go, you'd routinely go and be like, just get locked in the ice, right? Like
exactly. You get locked in the ice and you start eating boot leather and, people starve and die. And it's there, right? It was always there. And in fact, it is many summers now. You can.
Yeah, I was going to say it's all
it.
of a sudden a new object of interest.
Yeah, those books be a lot different now.
Yeah,
they'd be like, "Oh yeah, no problem."
Exactly. So it was looking for something that was there, but it was impractical and nearly impossible to get through during that time. These ships were nominally reinforced for the ice, but not. I mean, they couldn't withstand the pressure of the pack like an icebreaker could today.
So he thought by coming in on the Pacific side off the Bering Sea, you might get funneled into the right route.
Somehow, I don't know that he actually believed any of this stuff. There were a bunch of scientists in the Royal Society who did. And they're trying to find a shortcut across North America to get to China for trade and also to avoid the Spanish who dominated South America. So they didn't want to go under and around South America. They wanted to go over North America to avoid the Spanish. So that's kind of what's going on. He had determined that this giant supercontinent did not exist in the southern hemisphere, and now they're asking him to go solve this other huge puzzle.
God, what a long... I mean, people got to stop and think about what a long way around.
I know. It's over a year to get there. And
I mean, you're going across the Atlantic, down to around the southern tip, down around Patagonia, and then the way back, or however the hell they did it.
This time they go. He did that once as well, but on the third voyage he went around, Cape of Good Hope and Cape Town.
Oh, okay.
But still, I mean, it's the entire. You're spanning the globe.
Yeah.
And
no kidding. He went.
Just to get to the point where he began to look. He starts mapping North America. It makes landfall at present-day Oregon and starts mapping, or what we call Oregon, Washington, British Columbia, Vancouver Island, all of Alaska. He gets the first map of Alaska, and it's amazingly accurate, by the way.
Do you know where does he land? What kind of places in Alaska is he touching ground? Do you know?
Well, the most famous place that he went to was Cook Inlet. The present-day site of Anchorage. He goes all the way to the end of Cook Inlet. It's called Cook Inlet. By the way, he never named a single place after himself. Mm-hmm. When you see Cook's name on something, it's because somebody back in England put it on a map.
Why would he go way into Cook Inlet?
Well, at first, it's very wide. It starts to look like it sort of looks like a waterway. I mean, and it was early summer, and it was gushing with glacial melt and snow melt, and he thought it communicated. Maybe it communicated with the north end of Alaska, and some of the native people that he met seemed to suggest that. And then some of his officers were really excited. It's like, this is it. This is the Holy Grail. We found it. And of course, it peters out. It tapers. You've been there probably, right? It tapers, and then it just kind of becomes a couple of tributary rivers. But so that's one famous place. Prince William Sound, which he named. He also went to Unalaska. He went to, the entire West Coast. He went all the way to what we now call Point Barrow, Alaska. And that's where he encountered ice. He nearly got stuck in the ice permanently. I mean, he would have died. Both ships would have been crushed. And he decided to turn around and go back to that wonderful little archipelago that he had stumbled upon earlier in the voyage that we know as Hawaii.
And how is he behaving? You were saying he's like a little off, but had he done things along the Alaska coast that were off?
Well, the Alaska part of the trip is kind of classic Cook. He's back to doing what he loves to do, which is mapping and figuring out this enormous puzzle. And he was pretty happy, and he was embroiled in puzzle solving. It was earlier in the voyage in Polynesia where he was acting very strange, using the lash in a way that was just cruel to his own men, being cruel to the indigenous people that he encountered, cutting people's ears off, and doing these really sadistic things that nothing like that had happened on his first two voyages.
Like on his way to Alaska in Polynesia, stopping at places and doing this.
Now, obviously all these actions are being recorded by people on the ships. Are they hypothesizing that something's different about? I mean, or is it looking back now in hindsight, there's more and more speculation about his well-being, but like, were people on board writing something's very different?
No, the people on board are asking the same question. What the hell is wrong with the captain? Especially the ones that had been on the previous 2 voyages. They're like, this, I don't know if it's his celebrity had gone to his head. He's more arrogant. He was more peremptory and just like making decisions without explaining. He was not as collaborative. He was, and of course, the British Navy at that time. I mean, you could say he's becoming more like a typical British naval captain. Yeah, because this was a cruel world that they operated in, and most of them were like that.
You were like judge, jury, and executioner,
right? Master and commander.
On your ship.
Yeah. And so you could say that he was sort of becoming. He just become another European naval captain by that point. But he was also in pain. He had sciatica, intense pain that is very interesting. He encountered for the first time Polynesian massage, and this army of women has descended on him and cured him of his sciatica. And he describes it beautifully. It's believed to be the first description of massage. And, from his voyage, you get these other things, like you get the first description of, the word taboo and what it means, and tattooing, the first descriptions of surfing when they come to Hawaii. All of this stuff emanates from his voyages.
How does he describe surfing when they come?
Well, I don't know that he describes surfing very well, but one of his officers, a doctor, the surgeon, he tries, it's almost laughable because he tries to break it down, like the body mechanics of it. Like, then they get up on the board, they get on the declivity of the wave, and then they, do. And by the way, the British who are watching this can't believe it because most of them don't know how to swim, let alone surf. This is one of the weirdest things is that naval officers didn't, by and large, know how to swim. They weren't taught to swim. They weren't required to learn to swim. How is that possible? But
stay in the boat,
including Cook himself, he could not swim, which ends up being a problem for him later on.
Well, isn't that wild, man?
It
just seems like it'd be like such a part of it.
Well, what I read was that they believe that you're going to die anyway. Why prolong the agony? Just sink. Just die. Get it over with.
Like if you go in the water. That's it.
Yeah. It's bizarre. It's a very strange mentality.
Yeah, you think that attitude would change when they're sailing around seeing other people swimming.
Oh, yeah.
And they remark on how beautiful these swimmers are. And women with, babies at their breast, and they're still swimming out in these giant waves, just beautiful, strong swimmers. And, they're amazed by it, but they're like describing waves that they would themselves would never think of going into.
Yeah. When he's up in northern Alaska and hits ice, is it at that point, is it like, okay, the trip's over, let's start picking our way home? Or does he have a second thing on his to-do list?
Yes. Well, and this says something about Captain Cook's sort of determination and stubbornness. He decided, well, I've got to go back and make one more attempt at finding the Northwest Passage, but we're getting long in the summer season. I got to warm up for the winter. Why don't we come back for one more season and try it a little earlier in the season, try it at a slightly different angle or a different place.
Got it.
Maybe this ice that I've just encountered is an aberration of one season or something. So he's just going back to Hawaii to warm up, to replenish his stores, to let his men have some R&R, and turn around and go right back to Alaska.
And not Oregon.
Not Oregon for some. Well, you know what it is. I think he had a brief stop in Hawaii. He made landfall in Kauai, and he understood these islands are very special. This is a major find.
Got it.
He called them the Sandwich Islands, naming them after his boss, of course, Lord Sandwich.
Yeah, I've heard that term. I didn't know where they were, but I've heard the Sandwich Islands. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess he was sort of brown nosing. He was just trying to, gain favor of his boss, Lord Sandwich.
And when they were along Alaska, are they running into Ruskies along there?
They do run into a number of Russian fur interest.
No hostility, so.
No, they got
They
along
don't
very
have
well.
shootouts. Oh, okay.
They got along actually very well. In fact, at that point, England had a pretty good relationship with Russia.
When he goes on these 3 or 4 year expeditions, they just assume they're not going to hear from him until he gets back, or is there some does he ever send is there a way for him to send messages home or?
Well, the beam me up Scotty, they had that.
Right.
Captain Kirk. No.
But there's not outposts that he's
There are a few. One of them is Batavia, which is Jakarta, which was a Dutch colony, and they were able to get messages to Europe that way. Cape Town, South Africa was certainly one. When they encountered Russians in Alaska.
But still, those messages will still need to be manually transported.
All the way around the
You're just
world.
catching other boats.
It would take months and months and months. But they did encounter Russians in Alaska who promised to send some documents to St. Petersburg and then ultimately London. And these documents would go all the way across Siberia. What is that? 8, 9 time zones to Europe, and then finally London. And so some messages got to London that way. But it took forever. You have to understand they're just, once they leave Plymouth, they're gone for 4 years, and in every sense of the word.
So he heads to Hawaii and he's thinking he's going to check that place out more, kick it.
Yeah.
Resupply.
Resupply and also, there's always stuff going wrong with the ship. There's things breaking all the time. It's just clattering lumber up there. And there's great forests in Hawaii, and so there's that. His big worry was, getting back to the sex thing, was that his men would spread venereal disease, and he writes endlessly about it. He knew that his men were spreading venereal disease to these innocent people who didn't have gonorrhea or syphilis, and
but some of those diseases were in the New World, though. Some of those diseases were in North America.
They were in North America by then,
but
for
not
sure.
on the islands. Yeah.
No, there was a disease called yaws, which was a venereal disease, much more benign than syphilis.
Okay.
But no, there's no question that his men and also the French explorers and the Spanish explorers brought disease to Polynesia. But it was a real concern of Cook's. He mentions it just multiple times in his journal. And he
had he seen this happen before?
He'd seen it happen before. Yeah. He had his surgeon literally he would strip all the men, and anyone who had any signs of venereal disease were not allowed to go ashore.
Was his concern out of just genuine concern for the locals, or was it for the repercussions that would occur after it happened?
Then it would spread back around to his own men, you mean?
Well, no, that they might be
of it.
hey, you brought this disease, we're coming after you now.
Oh, perhaps that was a fear, but I think it was a genuine, humane thing.
Yeah.
He just this is an island he would determine that was innocent of this disease, and he abstained from sex the whole time, and he was married and had a family, and
you buy that?
I buy it.
Yeah.
I do buy it because every officer, just even ones who hated him, said he wouldn't, and
I'll give him one thing.
And Hawaiian women would come after him, and the chiefs would bring some of their ladies to the ship, and the ladies would get really pissed off at him when he would refuse them. What's wrong with you? Are you a man? What is this? What is the story? And he was a pretty stodgy Quaker trained dour Yorkshireman, and it's possible somewhere along the way something happened, including that time when all those masseuses descended on him.
Sure,
I think it was 12 or 14 women just jumped on him
and cured him of sciatica.
But I don't think anything more than that happened. There was no happy ending, I don't think there. But
but he's worried about his men. But does he not have the authority, or is it just unrealistic for him to say no consorting?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. These women are literally crawling from their canoes into the ship at all times. And one of the things that they're doing in some of the places is they're doing it for metal. They're absolutely obsessed with iron. And the men have found out that for the price of they could have and get, meet one of these women for the price of one nail. And what starts to happen is the whole of the ship is pounded with, there's the copper sheathing, and then they're pounded with nails. And the women were going underneath the ship because they're great swimmers and prying loose. The ship was coming apart, basically. These nails were being ripped out of the hull of the ship by the hundreds and hundreds. And Cook began to worry that the ship was literally going to disintegrate. From this iron that they were just obsessed with. And because they had never seen metal before, and they understood how useful it was, and what a powerful thing it was for scraping, for puncturing, for make hooks out of, make all kinds of implements out of. That's what they were after more than anything, was iron.
Got it. So there was a trade.
Yeah.
There was a trade component.
Yeah, definitely.
So when he heads back, he's worried about that, and he's desirous of mapping the whole archipelago. Like he's going to go around it and lay some claim to it.
Okay, so he was obsessed also with the question of whether the Spanish had been there, because the Spanish for centuries had been doing this thing called the Manila Galleon trade thing, where they would bring spices from the Philippines and they would drop them in Acapulco, and then in Acapulco they would get silver and all kinds of other things that had been mined in South America and Mexico, and take them back to the Philippines. So back and forth over the Pacific for centuries. The Spanish had been doing this. And they'd go right by Hawaii, very close, these sort of sea lanes that they were using. But so the big question he thought was, had the Spanish landed somewhere in the Hawaiian Islands? And if so, why hadn't we heard about it? And do they have their own maps of the Hawaiian Islands? And to his satisfaction, he determined that they hadn't. For some reason, almost miraculous, they had missed Hawaii after all those centuries. And he was the first European, almost certainly to land and describe these people. And he was amazed by them for many, many reasons, but more especially that they were Polynesian. They were the same people he had encountered in New Zealand, the same people that he encountered in French Polynesia, in Easter Island. We're talking about massive distances, and he was really beginning to piece together the idea that these people, this Polynesian diaspora, the only way it could have happened is that they were extraordinary voyagers. These weren't just accidental driftings. These were migrations.
When geneticists now look at the Polynesian diaspora, do they have any sense of when and where they became seafaring people? Like coming out of where?
Yeah, the best scholarship I've seen on it is, the main idea now is that they originated in Taiwan. Okay. Which is, how far that is. So Taiwan, starting to sail eastward from Taiwan through Micronesia and Melanesia, and finally landing probably in Tonga is one of the certain early places that they landed and kind of created an empire, and then Tahiti, and then finally Hawaii, and the very last arrivals to any of these islands was New Zealand. That was the farthest away.
Oh, no, the Maori. They found New Zealand. The Polynesians found New Zealand after they found Hawaii.
Probably, yes. I'm not absolutely sure on that, but I think yes. I think that the theory is that the Maori, what we call the Maori today, were the last. It was the last of the great lands of Polynesia settled.
Got it. If the Spanish had found it, let's say he found that the Spanish had found it. Was there the idea that they would counter that he would counter that claim, or was it just a curiosity?
He wouldn't have personally countered it. They had some weapons on board, but they wouldn't have been able to do any kind of actual fight.
Yeah.
Fighting.
He wouldn't have tried to expel them or something like that.
But he understood that he had to report back to the Admiralty, and that they would want to know all about whether the Spanish had been there or not. He's constantly looking over his shoulder, wondering. Also, this is another thing: is like, who knows? Maybe back in Europe, we're at war with Spain again, or we're at war with France, and he had to wonder and worry that perhaps he was going to have to get on a war footing all of a sudden. Here comes a ship, a French ship. Are we at war again? It's a crazy thing. He's trying to explore, and he's also got one foot in the kind of the military mindset at the same time.
How quickly do things go south between him and the Hawaiians?
Well, so his first stop was Kauai, and things went pretty poorly from the very beginning. He sent a young officer to look for water and look for a good landing place, and the Kauaians are going crazy. They don't know who these people are, what these ships are. They may think that they were gods.
Mm-hmm.
They certainly were curious about the metal because they had seen in driftwood little flecks and specks of metal, but they'd never seen so much metal
from disintegrated whalers or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, did they know about Europeans and ships, but just hadn't seen them yet, or are they not even?
Almost certainly, they had never seen Europeans.
But had they heard?
Ships,
they heard tell? You know what I mean?
Not that I've been able. The scholars have been able to prove.
So it seemed like a full on shock.
Yeah, there are rumors of possible Dutch shipwreck and another Spanish shipwreck that may have happened centuries earlier, but they were shocked and amazed, and there was kind of this weird feeling of celebration and rapture, like their world was about to change. And so they come ashore. So this officer goes in to find water, and immediately the Hawaiians gather around his rowboat, and this dude is trigger happy, this officer, and he shoots a Hawaiian and kills him instantly. Shoots him right in the sternum, right in the chest.
He feels threatened for some reason.
He feels threatened. He thought they were trying to steal the boat or something, but in fact they were trying to pull it in because the surf was so large and so heavy. So within minutes of arrival, they've killed a Hawaiian. And of course, this freaks the Hawaiians out, the Kauaians, I should say. This is the island of Kauai. And they don't know what this implement is that just killed one of their countrymen. And they're amazed by it and shocked, and they all just run. Run back to shore.
Sure.
And, but after that, Cook does come ashore, and things go very peacefully and very well. And
on the same, goes back to Kauai. Yeah,
on the same day, and then the next day, but then a bunch of men ultimately do make it ashore, and yes, there's sexual encounters and probably the spread of venereal disease. He goes to a heiau, a temple, and describes their ceremonies. He goes to their plantations where they're growing breadfruit and all kinds of elaborate architecture to kind of hold in the water. He's describing all this stuff. He knows that this is an amazing place, and he's hearing from. And by the way, he can understand them because some of his men had become fluent in Polynesian language by then. And this is the same language, essentially, with some variations that they were speaking in Tahiti. So he's hearing from these local people in Kauai that, hey, we're just one island. There's a bunch more over this way. Oahu and Maui and Hawaii and Lanai. And so he's realizing this is a big discovery. This is a big find, and there's a lot here. And so, but he's still got his mind on. I got to get to Alaska. And I have to do it in the summertime. So he's got a timeline that he's trying to, a deadline that he's trying to follow.
Where does he go from there?
From Kauai, he goes right across the Atlantic Ocean. The Pacific Ocean to Oregon. And starts working his way up the coast
again.
No.
This is the first.
I know
this is the first time around.
Yeah. It's very confusing because he stumbles upon Kauai on his way. He thought he'd just be sailing across the giant bulge of the Pacific Ocean forever till he made landfall in North America.
Okay, so this stop in Kauai when they kill the guy is on his way to the North America coast, so
Correct.
the U.S. Alaska coast.
Correct.
Then he does his adventures up there.
Right.
Runs out of time.
Right.
And then he decides to double back and he goes back to Hawaii.
And he makes land. The first island he sees on his way back is Maui, and he thinks he's going to go there and replenish his ship. But then another island, a bigger island, the big island of Hawaii, kind of shifts into his view, and he's like, wait a minute, I'm going over there. That's even bigger, and there's snow. There's snow on top of this mountain.
Yeah.
It's one. It's by some definitions, it's the tallest mountain in the world because it's if you start from sea
starts
level,
in the trench.
from the trench, yeah. And so he's amazed by this place, and he's like, that's where I got to go, and that ends up being a place of his death.
What? At what point do they just flat out run out of food they brought from home?
That's a good question. I don't know. They're constantly filling the casks, by like Cape Town. By the time they get to Cape Town, they're running out of food, and that's one of the things about Cape Town is that it was a Dutch replenishing station that you could get everything you needed there, whether it was salt pork or hardtack biscuits or they had pretty much everything. The Dutch were really good at not only replenishing Dutch vessels, but selling to the ships from other countries, European countries.
But then they're always scrounging, right?
Always scrounging.
Everywhere they go.
They're always scrounging and eating a lot of weird food. Cook, again, is demanding that his men eat fresh food and fresh vegetables and anything that they can find. So that's a big part of it. Plus, a lot of them are, they're out there. Why not put a line? Why not put a line in the water? They're constantly fishing. They're constantly, when they come ashore, they're constantly hunting. So, yeah.
Do any of them mention sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, what are the favorites? So I think that's like with the Lewis and Clark expedition, there's always or any of these sort of stories, it's like, this is what they preferred.
Yeah, dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I put together this thing. I don't know if we want to go into this, but
Let's do it.
A little bit.
Oh, yeah, hit us with a couple.
I've been thinking about having a party to celebrate the arrival of the new book and having some really weird food, and then going through the book and realizing some of the extremely weird food that they ate. And I've put together a kind of a little menu.
For sure.
So yeah, everything on here is in the book, but I've arranged it as though it were some kind of gourmet banquet. But we start with aperitif and appetizers of like any good banquet: grog, spruce beer, pate of sea hare, which is a slug that they encountered in Tasmania, and puffin squab, young puffin. That's they're such cute little birds, and apparently they ate a lot of puffin.
Really?
And then amuse bouche. You got to have something just to really get going, and that was tartare of curry. Liver, the liver of the curry, which was the ancient dog of New Zealand. It's now extinct. It was often eaten by the Maori.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, it's a weird looking dog.
So
we've
no
seen
doubt
them
a dog that had arrived with
the Polynesians,
and then became like a sort of went feral, and then now it's gone.
And now it's gone. Although you can see it in some museums, stuffed. Kind of like some of the things in this room. I mean, it's kind of strange looking, but
what I'm pulling up looks like a page out of the fucked up old taxidermy.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they
kind of like a dingo almost.
Yeah, it's probably related in some way. But anyway, a little curry because they were eating dog fairly often on this trip. You mentioned Lewis and Clark. They didn't want to. It wasn't their first choice, but they did. Then you got to have some salad. So the salad, I'm suggesting this light relish. They're constantly worried about scurvy, the scurvy as they called it, And so Cook had all these weird items that he thought could be anti-scorbutic or, anti-scurvy. And they consisted of a carrot marmalade, wort of malt, rob of orange. I don't know what that is. Rob of orange. Inspissated lemon juice, of course. And,
not peel of orange, not the peel.
Yeah, maybe it is. I don't know. And saloup, which is this root vegetable that they steeped for a long time. First course, loggerhead sea turtle burgoo. They ate so much turtle.
Yeah.
And of course, it's very tasty. That's not, no one is
you could probably
suffering.
stock up so quick when you're pulling into these places that aren't getting harvested.
Right. Sea turtle is that was good eating. And
you could probably keep them alive for a while and transport them.
Well, you read about when they would go to the Galapagos and get the land ones, flipping them over in the hold, and they'd stay alive for months.
Yeah. They come with their own packaging, basically, and as long as they're alive, they're still fresh.
Yeah.
So that was whenever they ran into turtle, they were in seventh heaven. Australian ghost shark fins are a delicacy, and they would like to fry those in seal grease. Seal grease, they would render the blubber of seals. They went down to this island called Kerguelen, which is way down there, almost to Antarctica. And they would render this seal blubber, which they described as no butter in England was ever thought half so good.
Really?
It sounds disgusting
So
to me.
they're making their own oil, rendering oil.
They were, which they cooked with. They use it in their lamps. They had to be pretty resourceful. They're, as you said, running out of food pretty early on, so they have to fill their lard or some other
better
way.
than butter.
It's the bear grease of the Pacific.
Better than butter.
But
That's a good way of putting it.
This ghost shark looks like an insane creature.
It
Don't they
is.
call it goblin shark too? Or is that a different shark?
Sometimes they're called elephant fish.
Oh. Let me see. Turn it toward me.
It's like those, what do we call them up at the shack? The little ones you catch?
They have
Oh, spiny dogfish.
No. What am I thinking of? Ratfish. They look like
like a ratfish. Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
A ratfish. I don't know. Second course, salted Hawaiian boar. Now they ate a lot of pig. Great eating. Obviously, no complaints there. But everything on the ship was covered in cockroach excrement. So it was just they could never deal. You always hear about the rats. The rats were a big problem, but an even bigger problem was the cockroaches, and their shit was just
the
everywhere.
Polynesians had spread pigs all over the place, right?
They brought them with them everywhere they went. Except New Zealand. Somehow the pig didn't make it to New Zealand until much later.
Yeah, it's there now. Yeah. The cockroaches. That a little bit surprises me that when you're starting out, you can't just when it's empty, just clean that son of a bitch out.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, he writes.
No, I guess, man, because then you got all the foods. Yeah, that's right. It's not like you clean your house and cockroaches are gone. Yeah, I got it.
It's bad. Okay, then the main course is they ate a ton of this walrus, but they called it sea beef, and they would eat it on kelp, bed of kelp. Good eating there. But the problem with the walrus was it really actually tasted horrible, and the galley chef described how you have to prepare it just to make it palatable because it's so, I don't know, greasy and
I've had some.
You've had some walrus?
Yeah.
What'd you think?
Well, I had fermented walrus, which I didn't like.
Oh,
Yeah,
Now,
Seth Kantner brought it.
Yeah,
we
on
had
that
the show.
subject, dude, the whale blubber is legit. Like that is delicious, man.
Mm-hmm.
The bow, like pieces of bowhead whale, where you have it's like a French fry with a black tip on it.
Okay.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
So it's a little bit of the skin. Imagine a French fry where most of it's white and on the end's like a black. It's like a mat, the same proportions as a matchstick.
Right.
The size of a French fry. The head of the match being skin and the wood of the match being blubber.
Good eating, huh?
Oh my God, it's good, man. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to read how they prepared it just real quick.
The walrus.
The walrus.
Wasn't a big walrus fan, but I'm sure I'd like it if I had it cooked right.
So they're up in Alaska, and they're seeing a lot of walrus, and they shoot the walrus, and it's a fair ordeal just getting them into the boat. But we let it hang up for one day that the blood might drain from it. After that, we tow it overboard for 12 hours. Then we boil it for 4 hours, and the next day cut it into chunks and cook it for several days. Even then, it is too rank and disgustful, both in smell and taste, to make use of, except with plenty of pepper.
It's funny that they towed it because your buddy
Ron
Bleed
Layton.
out?
I like that they said
Ron Layton says it pickles it.
I like that they said even after that it was bad, as if we did everything we could.
I don't think they were
typically. I think when someone's preparing a food for several days and they're dragging it overboard, I'd be like, that might be one of your issues.
I don't think they were trimming it good.
Yeah,
I think if you'd got down in there,
I think less is more.
if
with
you got
walrus.
down in there to the core of the meat, got down and trimmed it, core of the meat, there's no way it's gonna be bad.
I don't know.
I
think they had a lot of surface fat in there, man.
I had a whale steak.
I'd like to go back
that
in
was
time.
like-
That's what I would do. I'd go back in time to supervise that that walrus cooking.
Well, the Captain Cook himself was famously able to eat just about anything, and he never
He
complained.
drew the line there. Well, you know what? To back him up, I couldn't get into it. I didn't like it. Cal's like, "Oh, you just got to try another bite." I'm like, "Dude, I don't need another. I don't need another bite to tell you I don't like walrus meat."
But at the end of the meal, we got dessert, moldy yams. There were a lot of yams. That's sweet. The only kind of sweet thing they had, or sweet and savory seagull pie. They ate a lot of seagulls, and you would pair that with digestive, of course. Algae slimed cask water spiked with lemon juice and vinegar, or this was all over Polynesia. It was the kava. They're drinking this viscous fluid called kava, which is a drug. But the way they would do it is a lowly servant of the local chief would chew it and chew it and chew it and chew it, and then spit it into this bowl with all his saliva, and then that's what you would drink.
Oh.
You got you kind of buzzed, and it was a good way to finish off a good meal.
Did they travel with rum?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, grog, which
Yeah.
was like
Okay.
50-50 water and
Yep.
rum.
Yep.
Yeah.
How much do you want to get into Cook's death? I know, you got to there's two kinds of writers. You got the ones who are worried about telling the end of the books. They think people are not going to go get the book.
Right.
I think those ones are wrong. Then you got writers who is like, obviously it's hundreds of pages long. We're only talking about a little bit. There's tons more to read and learn about.
So obviously it's not a spoiler to note that Cook died a horrible and violent death in Hawaii.
We touched on that earlier.
I think it's what he's most famous for, honestly. Is
You
that
think so? He's famous for dying.
He's famous for getting killed on the shores of the Big Island. You go to the spot where he was killed. You said you've been by it. I hiked down to it. There's a monument there that notes the exact spot where he met his end. He was hacked to pieces. He was dismembered. His bones were spread all over the island, and the Hawaiians, both the ancient Hawaiians at the time and current Hawaiians, native Hawaiians, insist that he was, obviously, they say he was not eaten. And
Let's back up a minute.
Yeah.
I got a couple basic questions. How long had he spent interacting with the group of Hawaiians that killed him? So the people that lived in and around that cove.
Right.
Was it day one? Was he hanging out there for months on end?
No, they first of all, they circumnavigated the entire island of Hawaii and had all sorts of encounters out in the water. But they finally made landfall. Anchored in Kealakukia Bay in January of 1779, and about a month later. He's actually on Valentine's Day.
So he's having interactions.
Yeah.
He's having interactions.
And there's loads of debate among scholars about whether the Hawaiians thought he was the god Lano, who was the god of fertility, and he arrived during this festival of the Makahiki, which was to honor the god Lano, and here comes this guy in these two ships that like had never been seen before, and he was certainly treated like some kind of celebrity, and probably they did at first think that he was kind of the reincarnation of Lano. And these early ceremonies where, I mean, they're worshiping him. They bow down to him. Thousands of people out on the lava flats are like bowing down to him. So that's an interesting part of the story. Kind of this festival is going on. It's the happiest time of their year. It's sort of like carnival, and that's when they arrive. And Cook and his men have a wonderful couple of weeks there. Just some of the very best times of their whole voyage. Tons of food, beautiful women. They make all sorts of friends with the local men, and they go out, they go hunting, they go fishing. They're having the time of their lives. But then it's time to leave. Cook decides it's time to go. They're going to go back to Alaska.
Well, a little bit of this adulation has a fade because you got to have balls to put a knife into a god.
Right. Yes.
I mean, so they're after a while putting together that, there's this trilogy. You ever see the Highlands trilogy about Papua New Guinea?
No.
It's really interesting, but they talk about a moment. It's a narrative about first contact, which in the Highlands was late 1900s. You're still having first contact with groups, and eventually these indigenous people from Papua New Guinea, who they think these white guys are gods that show up, but they took a real interest in their excrement. And they're like, that ain't a god.
Yeah. Well,
that's us.
Yeah. But that's a really good question about the boldness of putting, deciding to kill a god or someone who they may have thought was a god. But what happened was they actually left Hawaii, and for 2 or 3 days were crawling up the coast of the Big Island on the way to Alaska when they encountered a storm. And the storm snapped the foremast, and he has to put in somewhere and repair the ship and find a tree, large enough to repair the mast. He can't go any further, so he turns back around and goes back to that same bay. And now there's realizing he's not a god. If he was a god, if he was Lano, yeah, exactly. His boat is broken, and why wouldn't he just fix it himself if he was a god? So from the minute they returned, everything was different. They were not greeted. They were not, they were not treated in anything like the same manner.
Wasn't there one of his men who died when they return, and they're like, clearly,
yes,
this man is.
There was a guy named Watman who died of some kind of disease, and they buried him there. And the Hawaiians treated him with great respect, but and the burial and so forth. But they're like, these guys
is suspicious.
These white dudes aren't. They don't seem to be gods. They seem to be very much like us. And so clearly, it had begun to dawn on everyone from the lowly servants all the way up to the chiefs and the kahunas that these were not gods anymore. And I don't like to talk about this precise circumstances that lead to the death, because that's like it's escalation, the sort of rapid escalation of miscues and cultural misunderstandings, and obviously the language barrier, and things get out of hand real quickly.
It's remarkable. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Is there different versions of what happened in British history and Hawaiian history?
Yeah, there are. And including, one of the stories, one of the Hawaiian versions, several of the Hawaiian versions have Cook having sexual relations with Hawaiian princesses, both on Kauai and in Hawaii, and that may have contributed to some of the misunderstandings, or but the English say that's absolutely not true. And that's just a story that comes from American missionaries who hated the British and wanted to make Cook look like a terrible guy, you know.
One question about it is, how did they get their hands on the captain? Joey, why is there not like a lot of layers of security?
Yeah. Well, there were Marines that came ashore with him. He was, I won't go into all the details, but he was trying to basically kidnap the king of Hawaii and get him on his ship, hold him for ransom so that he could get back a rowboat that some Hawaiian warrior had stolen. And he was dragging, not quite dragging. He was
he himself. I know you don't want it every single detail, but like it's just so bizarre to me that he himself is there.
He himself went ashore to do this. He was roaring.
He's like, I'll do it. Damn it.
Yep, and he was roaring mad.
You can sympathize.
Yeah, he was roaring mad. He was so mad at this.
They're like, they won't give us the boat back. By God, I'll get that boat back.
Pretty much. with a contingent of Royal Marines who were not very good at their jobs, by the way, and things escalated real fast. And here's what I will say about his death is that almost certainly
you lay all the nitty gritty out in the book. Right?
Oh my God, yeah. Okay. It's the last third of the book is really kind of what happened on that fateful day. But one of the things that they had done,
third of the book.
Well, that's Hawaii, the last third of the book. I suppose it's the last 50 pages is the real.
That knife goes in real slowly.
Chapter 19, the knife goes deeper.
But what's interesting is the blacksmiths had been churning out these crude knives as gifts to the Hawaiians because they were so interested in metal, and they were just churning them out as fast as they could. And it's one of those knives, those crude knives that the British gave them that ended up killing Cook. So note to self, don't give people you don't know very well a weapon, a metal weapon.
Wow.
So, so that's, and then of course there's a lot of debate about what happened to Cook's body. The only parts of him were returned to the British. There's a story that some young Hawaiian children saw Cook's heart hanging up to dry. And this is a story that Mark Twain tells when he visited Hawaii, and that this heart was, they thought it was a dog's heart and ate it. So that's really the only possible known incidents of cannibalism here.
Twain's getting the story
a century later.
Yeah. So I was going to say like probably just shy of a century later.
Yeah, about a century later.
So
yeah.
take that.
So take it with a grain of salt.
Take your heart and that story with a grain of salt, man. Yeah.
Yeah, and some cockroach excrement.
When you said they gave parts of him back, why? How? Like,
Well, so the new captain, whose name is Captain Clark, who was number 2, now he's number 1, is demanding the Hawaiians to give back his remains because the Hawaiians didn't quite understand the British. That they wanted his whole body back. They wanted to have a formal burial at sea. And they're like, we don't have his body. We have some parts of his body.
Happy to give you a part.
They gave him a part of his thigh, some bones, his part of his skull, but had been scalped, part of his hat, a couple of items of his clothing, but what they had done traditionally, this is what they did to their own revered chiefs, is they would burn the body, scrape away any remaining flesh, and save the bones. That's where the mana was, the power of the body, and different chiefs would they would spread it all over the island and hold on to these bones as relics. And that's what they had planned to do with Cook and did do. But some of the bones somehow got returned, and they assumed that they were Cook's, that they were telling the truth.
Do you mess with the wrong?
How did that not escalate into a full-on
that would be my next question.
Were they did the English just feel like they were outnumbered and it would be very dumb, or Like,
Yes. Well, it did escalate, by the way,
Okay.
but they wanted those remains back. They also wanted 4 different Marines also were killed in this conflagration.
that.
And they wanted the remains of those Marines too. And so they had a delicate.
That's a weird deal. Like, how come? Who are those hosers? Do you know what I mean? Like when someone real famous, like, you know,
Yeah.
like Cook, I never even heard about these other guys.
Yeah. There's 4 that met their end.
Those people's families are probably like,
there's
dude, come on.
there's always some no names in Star Trek that get killed and you know.
Red shirts.
Yeah, so 4 other guys?
Yeah. And a bunch of Hawaiians, probably as many as 20 warriors were killed that day too.
That day?
Yeah, by the Marines who were shooting constant as fast. But it took forever to reload these
I
damn
didn't know there was
muskets.
a gunfight.
Yeah. Muskets, you know, it takes forever to.
In my head, I'm glad you're telling me. In my head, he was up there with just with him or some other guy, and it was just that. I didn't know that it broke out into a.
Yeah. But so they waited to escalate and retaliate because they wanted those remains back, and they figured, well, if they retaliate now, they'll never get the remains back. So they did get the remains back, and then they turned the cannons on shore, and a lot of people were killed. And I don't know that we ever know how many precisely, but probably hundreds were killed.
Okay.
Really?
It turned into a kind of a battle, a pitched battle.
Well, or just a
I had no idea
slaughter.
about that.
Mm-hmm.
Man,
Yeah.
you'd think that, well, who knows? You'd think that your response would have been like, shit got a little sideways. Let's just pull out.
Yeah.
And reapproach this in the future.
Yeah.
Like, we're pulling up, killing their guy.
Yeah.
Over in Kauai, over a misunderstanding.
Yeah. Yes, and that's certainly what the Captain Clark wanted to do. He didn't really want to retaliate, but some of the junior officers got extremely pissed off, and one of them is a very famous guy named William Bligh.
Oh.
He becomes famous with the mutiny on the Bounty.
Bligh was there?
Bligh was the master of Cook's ship. He learned from Cook, you know. The other great officer on this ship was Vancouver, who, you know, one of the greatest explorers of all time as well. So there's a cast of characters.
Vancouver.
Yeah, that Vancouver, yeah. So these young officers get really pissed off that their mentor, this man they loved, Captain Cook,
And they just start
killed him.
cutting loose on the people.
They do. Yeah. They do, I'm afraid. It's true. Especially Bligh. He's a really severe guy. Very, very capable seaman, but kind of a badass. Take no prisoners kind of
So
attitude.
we'll learn more about Bligh in the book.
You will. He's all over the book. He's an important part of the story. I forgot to mention him.
Dude, I can't wait to read the book, man. I'm excited.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me back.
How many
It's been
years
good
did you
to be
work
with
on the book?
This one took me forever, partly because of COVID, which slowed.
because it interrupted all your research.
Yeah, a lot of
travel?
the trips and stuff, but it took me about 5 years to do, and it's finally out. I can't believe it.
What are you doing next?
I'm coming back to the West. I'm writing about Colorado Territory, and during the Civil War. I'm writing about the Sand Creek Massacre. I'm writing about the Civil War. I'm writing about the Gold Rush and the creation of Denver. Another kind of like Blood and Thunder.
How are you gonna bracket that out?
I'm working on it. I haven't figured it all out yet, but I'm.
But you narrowed in on like an era, a bunch of big events, but like, you know, Blood and Thunder was Kit Carson.
Right.
There's
a character who was at Sand Creek, an amazing guy named Silas Soule. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's the officer that refused the orders to attack the Cheyenne and ended up testifying against his commander, Colonel Chivington. And,
I know that name.
And we know about what really happened at Sand Creek because of this young man who was 26 at the time, who was very brave, and then he was ultimately murdered for his testimony. So he's the main character. Silas Soule is his name.
Got it.
But yeah,
what you can you how do you bracket this in years?
During the Civil War, basically 1860 to 1865.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it'll be carried. Whatever you're looking at will be carried within those years of the Civil War.
That's my idea.
Yeah.
Anyway.
What's cool about that is it's just so unless you're a fan of the good, the bad, and the ugly, which I am. The the West in the Civil War is not widely understood. I mean, I don't even fully understand it. Like you're always surprised, be like, oh, that's right. There was sort of like there's a sort of theater of operations.
Yeah.
In the West and desert Southwest during the Civil War, and everybody's reading about Antietam and Gettysburg.
Right.
But they're like shooting it out in the desert, you know.
Well, I live in Santa Fe, and I'm very curious about what was going on during the Civil War out here. And there was a big battle near Santa Fe called the Battle of Glorieta Pass, and this guy Silas Soule was there, and and a lot of other shenanigans going on out west. I mean, it's just it's a part of the story I think most Americans don't know about. When they talk about the Civil War.
So you just go from one to the next.
Yep, I'm pretty deep into this next one already.
You still do magazine reporting?
Nah, not much anymore.
Just books?
Magazines aren't what they used to be. They're thinner and they're printed on cheaper paper, and it's kind of sad shadow of what they used to be. It feels like, but I occasionally write for some, and I still have an association with Outside Magazine, which is still a great magazine. It's doing what it can, but no, I just focus on the books mainly. It keeps me pretty busy for years at a time. So
has Hollywood come knocking about Cook?
Not yet, but maybe after this wonderful podcast.
They better. Trying to think he was 50?
He was 50.
I might do my acting.
Yeah, right.
Start to. I'll be like, I know a guy who's exactly that age.
The timing is uncanny for you.
Blimey. Like, no, this guy's exactly that age. He's exactly that age. It's perfect. Well, no, I wouldn't be, because he was 50 when he left. By the time they make the movie, I'll be
Yeah.
I'll be 53.
It takes a while for to get all that underway.
Dude, when I do my dying scene on the beach, it's gonna blow you away, man.
You could have Danny Bolton be the guy that kills you.
I'm gonna give speeches. I'm gonna pull some lines from Shakespeare. It's gonna be a long death scene.
You'd look good in a tricorn hat and leggings.
Chewing a walrus
steak.
steak.
And be like, suck it, Brody. All right, again, the very excellent writer who, meticulous researcher, a great eye for the unusual, Hampton Sides and the wide, wide sea, Imperial Ambition, First Contact, and the fateful final voyage of Captain James Cook, out now. New York Times bestselling author of Ghost Soldiers, up on top there. Thanks for coming, man. Appreciate it. Best of luck with the book.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's been really fun. I've enjoyed this. So.
All right, great. Thank you.
See you next time.
Yep.
They're wild desperados when they're care. And if it runs over the mountains or swims in the sea, they'll bag up a sockeye, a turkey or bear, and then they'll kill it all over again. On the air, it's the MeatEater Podcast for me. It's the MeatEater Podcast.